Long days, pleasant nights, and welcome to Kingslingers, a Doof Media podcast journeying through Stephen King's Dark Tower series and beyond. I am your host, Constant Reader Scott Daly, and I'm joined, as always, by the only fat boy I want to kiss. It's Matt Freeman. How's it going today, Matt?
Just great. I'm. I don't know how to react to that. That's great.
I think that's a fair reaction.
Yeah.
Or lack of reaction, rather. This week on the show, after finishing Stephen King's It, we are now turning our attention towards the adaptations of this book. This week, we're going to be taking a look at the 1990 two-part miniseries event, aptly titled It. They just called it It.
It's not Stephen King's It.
It might be actually. I don't know. Okay. I think the poster I have, it just says It. But then when I rented it on Amazon, which I did, by the way, after I realized that it's just available for free on Max, which is the third time I've done that in the past 3 weeks, it's actually listed on Prime as Stephen King with an exclamation point. It.
Yeah, I noticed also that there was a weird streaming situation here where there was one thing that was like, would you like to buy all 3 seasons of Stephen King's It? And I'm like, I don't think that you have this down correctly.
I think it actually is officially Stephen King's It.
But also just It also at the same time as both.
Yeah, I don't know how that works. Like, is that part of the rights deal that you say, okay, I'll sell you the rights to this movie, but you have to put my name big on it? Or is that just a marketing ploy? Probably both.
I don't know, but I do wonder how much of a problem it was even prior to the era of social, of the internet, to name something It, because it's like going to be really hard to find or refer to.
Hey, did you see It? See what? It.
Yeah. What are you talking about?
I met some people who didn't know the Who's on First routine a couple days ago, and I just couldn't believe it.
That's so strange to me. That's like part of our culture.
I know. So yeah, we're going to be talking all about Stephen King's It, exclamation point. And then next week and the week after, we're going to get into the newer adaptation. So for the next 3 weeks, we're talking about movies. We're talking about It adaptations. And I think we are going to have a lot to say, especially Matt this week, I think.
Yeah.
Before we get into the movie itself, we did just want to once again remind you folks that the time to buy tickets for our live in Bangor show this June is rapidly approaching. It is November 2nd, if you're listening to this episode the day it came out, which means you have only 2 short weeks until the tickets go on sale officially, and that's less than 2 weeks if you're a patron, because we are giving our patrons a 48-hour head start on that. So make your plans, get ready, head over to the link in our show notes, which will have all the details and the link to the ticketing website. Just wanted to make sure you guys don't forget that. It's coming up very fast. It's going to be here before you know it. So get ready. Tickets are going on sale, and I have a sneaking suspicion they're going to go pretty fast.
Yeah, based on everything we're seeing, it would benefit you to be early in the queue if you are really excited about this.
Yeah.
Once again, this event is being sponsored by SK Tours of Maine. Without them, this event wouldn't be nearly as big and fun as we're planning it to be.
Yeah, definitely.
So hope to see you there.
Yeah, sponsored by SK Tours. Robin Firth as our honored guest. We get to chat and really nerd out Dark Tower with her for an hour or so. It's going to be a really fun event. It's going to be a really fun weekend, and we hope to see as many of you as possible there.
Yep.
All right, Matt, let's get into it. Let's talk all about Stephen King's It. This movie, Matt, was written by Tommy Lee Wallace and Lawrence D. Cohen. It is directed by Tommy Lee Wallace. And it stars a whole lot of people, but a few of them you might know. Tim Curry, John Ritter, Jonathan Brandis, Annette O'Toole, Tim Reed, and like we said, just a whole bunch of other people. It was a 2-part series event that premiered across 2 days back in the halcyon days of 1990, when TV was still a thing that you had to turn up for at the time it happened.
Right.
And if you missed it, tough.
Yep.
And that's, I mean, I guess first I want to get your overall thoughts, your high level thoughts on this thing, and then I think the place that I want to dive in after that is just like setting the scene for this movie, like what TV was like in the early '90s. So before we do
Yeah.
that, though, Matt, what did you think overall about this adaptation of it?
I guess first of all, to remind people, I never saw this actually. I might have seen like 2 minutes of it on TV at one point. I never saw the movie though. One of those weirdos who made it through my youth in America without ever watching the TV show. It would have been a very different life if I had, I imagine. Um, but it grew on me, is what I'll say. I kind of at first I was like, oh, okay, this is one of those corny, sort of painful to watch now, 35-ish years later, relics from the era of TV, not as bad as Langoliers, but nothing great. And then as it went on, I started to see why people like this and why they remember it fondly. And there are some really good moments in there. And I'd almost say it gets better as it goes along. And then there are kind of isolated moments kind of sprinkled throughout that are also pretty compelling. I think overall, I came away from it feeling like they did a good adaptation, in the sense of what an adaptation is meant to be, where you have to make some changes to adapt it
Mhm.
to the new medium and reduce its time. They have to circumscribe some things, and I was very pleased with how much did make it into the movie, more or less verbatim. Like I really enjoyed Henry Bowers talking to the moon in his insane asylum, and just like details like this, where I'm like, oh, it's kind of cool that they kept, like, this is really not like a super consequential scene, but they kept the details of it, and it works really well, and I enjoyed that. And I think I broadly agreed with all the sort of adaptational changes that they ended up making. It's just there's also a ton of corniness to it, and a ton of like moments where it's just kind of boring.
Yeah.
So on the whole, it's like, yeah, not great, not like one of my favorite King adaptations, but I think I liked it maybe even a little bit more than I expected to. I think I had moderately accurate expectations, and then maybe it slightly exceeded them.
Hmm.
Yeah, so that's all. That's my overview of my feelings on this movie slash series.
That's really interesting. I like what you said there. I think there's some ways in which I think I disagree with you in that I think the first half for me works better than the second half does. And I think it kind of loses steam after basically, this thing is divided into basically night one and night two. And night one ends on Stan's suicide. And then, in the original thing, there was a to be continued there, and then it picked up the next day with the
Okay.
rest of the story. Um, and I think the night two stuff just generally works not as well for me. I like the kid actors more than I like the adult actors, I think, for the most part. And I think some of the characters get lost a little bit. We'll go into this in detail, but no, I'm glad you enjoyed it. I mean, I think I'll say here at the top that like this thing is and was hugely important to me. Like I think I've told the story already about how me and my cousin and my sister snuck out of our bed a room. We were visiting my cousin when this thing played on TV, and our parents were watching it, and my aunt and uncle were watching it. We snuck out of bed and we hid behind the couch and watched it. And I was like racking my brain on this rewatch, trying to remember which part I did see because we didn't watch it for very long. I'm
Uh-huh.
pretty sure Pennywise was definitely there. I'm pretty sure it was the library scene, possibly. Um, and I just remember being absolutely terrified.
Uh-huh.
Just like just Tim Curry and the work he's doing in this movie just hit me in this very specific kind of way. And I think the thing that's most important about this movie is that I am not a minority in that experience, right? That
Uh-huh.
so many people our age, this thing was like the defining moment of their horror appreciation and their Stephen King appreciation. Like I mean, we talked to Kim last week, and she said she kind of watched this thing before she read the book. So many people, if you go out there, so many people experienced this miniseries as a kid, and it just really defined what kind of horror stuff they liked and what they didn't, and was genuinely seen as pretty freaking terrifying.
Yeah,
Um,
that makes sense. I I don't remember if any of it was scary to me as a grown ass man, but that's
Yeah,
okay.
it's
Eh,
not. So like here's what I'll say. I don't think any of it's scary to me now. I do think there's still moments where I could be like, oh yeah, that's creepy. That's like this
yeah,
is like a creepy thing that's happening here. And like as an adult, I'm not like physically scared, but I could see being creeped out if I hadn't watched this thing like 6 times and know exactly what's going to happen when and all that stuff. Like
yeah,
I do think legitimately the library scene with Richie, where like he's trying to talk to people and like you know Tim Curry's just going crazy and the balloons are popping and blood is appearing on everyone and they don't notice it at all. I think that's a legitimately creepy scene.
yeah. So that's one thing I agree with is Tim Curry. There's something, and I really wish I could articulate what it was about his performance that just oozes malevolence
Yeah.
and evil, which is amazing because he's a clown. But it's like something to do. Like I mean, it's all in the eyes and the mouth. He's doing
Yeah.
amazing things with his mouth in this movie,
Mm-hmm.
um, and his voice. Obviously, I mean, he has the most magical voice of any human. Um, and yeah, like there's a lot of Pennywise in the movie. Like I see, it's funny that the characters actually mostly just call him Pennywise. They don't call him it because it's confusing. They call
Yeah.
the being Pennywise,
Which
and
is what we did, and then people yelled at us for.
and then people yelled at us. But that's a good adaptation choice to me. Is like
Yeah.
focus on Pennywise. Give us a face to this monster. You know they do have it show up as the werewolf, and they have it show up as the mummy and stuff. But it's usually a brief sort of flash where it's just trying to scare them in some specific way, and then it turns back into Pennywise to taunt
Mm-hmm.
them. Um, and and I love that. Like I every minute. First of all, Pennywise was on the screen more than I thought he would be, and I loved every minute of it. Like
Yeah.
paradoxically, sometimes I think it's like, oh, you don't want to oversaturate the viewer on the on the monster, right? But like this is, I guess, what I would call an exception where he's really just like taunting our heroes in a way that just makes you feel more uncomfortable and more
Yeah.
threatened and it all relies on his ability to sell it, right? I'm very curious, tangent, but I'm very curious to see how they do Pennywise in the next movie because I've sort of decided this is like the right way to do Pennywise in a movie. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, I love that aspect of
It's
things.
very different, and we'll hold that conversation till next week for sure. But I mean, I think the Georgie scene to me sums up, the success of this performance and the choice of this performance. Because like one thing that I love about the Georgie scene is that Tim Curry is able to be kind of silly and charming in a way that you could believably see a child approaching him in a sewer, despite the basic absurdity of there being a clown in a sewer.
Yeah,
And like he's able to perfectly channel like the goofiness and the silliness and the like the key rect was so
yeah,
on point and perfect there.
yeah,
But then he's also able to flip that switch and just become menacing. And it's even before the teeth come out and you see the teeth, he's just able to like suddenly flip that switch and be just legitimately terrifying. And yeah, I mean, he's to me the absolute highlight of this whole thing. And I think he's the reason why, you know, we were so afraid of this. It wasn't even like it's not the monsters he was becoming. It's not the teeth. It's just this, as you said, this almost ineffable malevolence to the lines that he says and how he reacts to the characters and all this stuff.
yeah.
It's just absolutely perfect. I mean, Tim Curry is God. He's just so fucking good at everything he does. But the perfect casting here.
Yeah, I mean, I would even go so far as to say like all the good stuff about the movie is just like a handful of actors doing an amazing job
Hmm.
with the material, and then everybody. I'm not going to say everybody does an amazing job, but everybody does an acceptable job.
Yeah.
Um, and and overall, like that's sometimes the corniness in a movie is like the actors just suck, or it's just like uninteresting because the actors are not selling it. And that
Hmm.
is not the problem the movie has. The actors are doing fine. It's just some of these scenes are so um just awkward. It's
Well,
just yeah,
this is the central problem of adapting King is sometimes his scenes are just really corny, and
yeah,
and and it works in in book format, right? Like a lot of these, like sometimes the dialogue is like it's a literal copy from the book. Like it's just they're saying the things they said in the novel, or the tone of the scene is exactly as it would have been in the novel. But it's just different to see when you see a bunch of full grown adults sitting around talking that way to each other. It just has a different feel to it, and um, it doesn't work as well. And
Yeah.
and also combined with this is like a very interesting like tonal decision for this movie. I think was to basically kind of make it melodrama in a lot of
Uh-huh.
ways, like and really emphasize the drama a lot, especially in the second half. This is the thing I want to talk about TV in the 90s. Like this was a real turning point in television, I think, because we were starting to see TV at this point like move away from what the traditional idea of television was. Like Twin Peaks, I think, premiered half a year before this movie. And I think Twin Peaks is just a different kind of television that anyone had ever seen at the time. And it actually, like the melodrama and like the soap opera-ness of Twin Peaks actually reminded me a lot of this thing when I was watching. I know you haven't seen Twin Peaks, but um uh, it's not the same obviously, but it reminded me of it sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah. There's something very, very, early '90s about the
Mhm.
the nature of something to do with the way things are shot, the way things are like even the style of acting. I would say is just something that was in the air at that time. Just I have to say like I don't want to hold this against the movie, right? Because it's just everything that was shot for TV was shot in a very particular way,
Yeah.
which now when you watch it on a giant, 4K TV screen, it just looks corny. And it's like, that's not the show's fault. Like they made probably what looked really good on a 16-inch CRT, TV screen in 1990. It probably looked as good as anything. It probably looked totally fine. And
Yeah.
but now it's very very hard to like see past like all the stuff when they're in the sewer. It just looks fake as hell. It just
Yeah,
looks
it
like a
looks like a
set.
set. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's like that. That's kind of not their fault because it probably looked totally fine on a TV.
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely always like been a proponent of like that stuff doesn't matter. Like Buffy
Yeah.
the Vampire Slayer is one of my favorite shows. It looks like this a lot of the times where you're in sets that are clearly sets. The special effects like just don't work a lot of times. There's a very famous episode in season 5 that has a giant snake, and like when it cuts between the CG version of the giant snake, which looks awful, and the puppet version, it's just like they're two entirely different things, and it
Yeah.
it doesn't work. I think the spider in this movie does not work. Like it just doesn't work. But I don't really hold that against it. I mean, it accomplishes like from a character perspective the emotional conclusion of it is 5 adults kind of just like awkwardly hitting a plastic puppet spider, and like like the badassness of the scene where Bill goes like diving into it and like pulls out its heart and squashes it, like that's completely lost to me because it just looks so goofy. But it,
Yeah.
it almost doesn't matter
No,
ultimately.
I mean none of that bothered me. I think I was kind of just already saturated with the idea of like, oh, this all looks pretty awful, but whatever. I'm
Yeah.
past it. I did like, well, there were a few adaptation choices that I liked, and since you mentioned that, I wanted to just ping off of it and say like the idea that Eddie sort of gets more of a focus before they go into the final confrontation, and then they all sort of get sucked into the deadlights, and they're all
Hmm.
standing catatonic while Bev runs off to find the slug, and Eddie is left. Yeah, like it's a very clear. It's like, yeah, this is how you do this in a movie, right? Because in
Yeah.
the book it's very chaotic. It's very chaotic because it's a novel, and you can show all these different things happening at once, and what's happening in different people's heads, and the metaphysical aspect of things can be portrayed in film. There's no way to portray this epic battle, this psychic battle. So you have them get sucked in, and they're all paralyzed, and then Eddie has to save the day, and then he dies, and you're like, okay, yeah, that's you did it, you did it.
Okay.
That's what
Yeah.
you should have
Like
done.
I I it's not that I'm disagreeing. I think what they did to Eddie there kind of pissed me off. So generally I agree with you. I think like this movie kind of downplays, I think, one of the big motifs of it, which is the power of belief a little bit.
Uh-huh.
I don't think it really gets into that very much. And I think the Eddie sequence is a perfect example of this, where, we see the sequence when he was a kid and he says this battery acid and sprays Pennywise in the face, and it melts his face a little bit. Really love that scene. And then we see him repeat the scene again in as an adult, and, and it doesn't do anything.
Uh-huh.
And then he dies.
I
It has no effect on it. He just grabs him and then picks him up, which is another special effect thing where, like, we don't actually see him do anything to Eddie. He just picks
yeah.
him up and then drops him, and then he's dead. Like, okay.
Yeah.
And then like I guess I understand your point in that, like, what that did is it bought Bev time to get the slug to then hit him in the deadlights and save the others. Like, yes, like Eddie was key to that, but I just felt it was a weird commentary on, or non-commentary on, the power of belief, in that it functionally, like, Eddie's belief in the inhaler functionally did not do anything specific in that moment. It was just a great distraction to
It's
give
true.
Bev some time.
I guess that you're correct. I don't think I really thought about this in the moment, but I guess if I am going to think about it now, what I would have to say is like, well, I think in the movie's view, that's just not there at all. That the idea that the adults have to rely on the power of belief.
Yeah.
The kids, I'm trying to remember, other than the battery acid, do the kids even have to do anything?
Not really. They really minimize that
Yeah.
that whole idea throughout the entire movie.
Yeah. I mean, and I kind of see this is the thing where you get into the area where I think reasonable people can disagree over what's necessary for good adaptation, because I think someone can rightly say, like, hey, it's a major theme of the book. It's a major element of the book. It's kind of silly to leave it out or just shortchange it. And then I think on the other side, you can say, well, that's like, it's an enormous book with a lot of stuff going on in there. And to
Yeah.
really do justice to that whole theme, I worry that it muddies things. And I worry, and another like a thing that almost happens in the book is it gives you a sense of like, well, hold on, like, why am I even worried if if all they have to do is believe, then they'll just kick its ass. They'll just believe at it really hard and blow it up. You know, and
Sure.
so like by, you actually want to take away your hero's weapons to raise the stakes. So I don't mind that change. The battery acid moment aside. Yeah.
I guess I agree. I mean, I think the one fascinating thing about this whole thing is when, when the original writer of this, Lawrence D. Cohen, who, by the way, also wrote Carrie, the 76 De Palma Carrie, when he kind of originally wrote a treatment for this thing, he wrote it to be 8 to 10 hours long. It was going to be a miniseries over multiple nights, more similar to, I think, the Stand miniseries that came out a few years later. And actually, like, they were gonna go that way, and Romero was attached to direct, actually.
Uh-huh.
And then basically NBC said, no, how about like 4 hours? And Romero was like, okay, I'm out, bye. And that's when they picked up Tommy Lee Wallace to direct it. But I think it's just this thing where, like, obviously it's an 1100 page book. You're going to have to carve so much out of this thing. And I do think it's really interesting that, like you said, the choices that the story makes to keep a lot of scenes and a lot of sequences and pull a lot of plot from the book. But I do think they did carve a lot of, in my opinion, the meaning from the story to make room for this plot. And maybe that it makes it a functional story, but just not one that I like love.
Yeah. I don't think you're off base there. It's very hard to do this sort of operation on oneself, but I'm trying to imagine like what I would have thought about the story if I had only watched the show and never read the story.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, yeah, it's because you're inevitably bringing in all kinds of context about Henry Bowers, and like Henry Bowers is one element where he's just as important a character as the losers are, in terms of the narrative weight that he carries and all this, and the amount of his backstory that we get. and in the show he's he's a bully. He shows up a couple times.
Yeah.
Um, shows up as an adult and gets stabbed, and he's out. It's almost
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
like I was almost like, I wonder if you could just take out Henry Bowers. Just like, well, no, that would mess everything up. But he's so minimal here, and that's the thing is like there's a lot of stuff like that. There's a lot of stuff like that
Mhm.
where you're like I only this only even makes sense to me because I read the book and I know
Yeah.
who Henry Bowers is, and I'm bringing in the context of this deep animosity he has for Mike specifically, which the book, the show does nothing to establish, right? So,
Yeah. I mean, I definitely want to spend some time on the structure of the thing, because I think the structural choices that they make here are probably some of the most important adaptive choices they had to make. And I think, I generally like the structural choices that they made. I do think like sometimes this thing to me feels like they were trying to squeeze so much plot in that we move from scene to scene without any real propulsiveness. It's just like we're just going to hop from moment to moment, um, and there's no real linking of them together. But let's talk about the structure a little bit, because the one thing we said while we were reading this book is that this book has a very unique structure in that it's primarily a story in which people are remembering events that happened when they were kids, while simultaneously doing events as adults. And it's really important, as we said, that these two things lay on top of each other. That technically this is a book with two climaxes, and it actually is a book in which both climaxes basically happen at the same time. And that is a thing that I don't think works in this medium at all. So I think they had basically two choices here, and the first choice is what we'll see in a week. What the newer movies do, which is just say, okay, we're just going to carve out the two parts, and we're just going to tell the kid part first, and then we're going to tell the adult part, and that'll be our story.
uh-huh.
This doesn't do that, right? This tries to maintain the structure of the first the book as much as possible, in that we meet our characters as adults first. Basically the first night of the movie is them getting the call from Mike, flashing back to an event when they were remembering an event where they were children, and then heading to Derry. The thing it does do here, it makes a couple choices to change things. The first one is we actually get our climax with Pennywise at the very end of the first act. So it would be like if halfway through the book we saw the losers go down there and fight Pennywise. And I think that's, I don't want to say a mistake, but I do think that results in kind of a problem here. So I mean, I guess, what did you think of the Pennywise confrontation with the kids happening halfway through?
I don't really. I hesitate to comment too strong because I'm like, I don't know how you do that, right? So I'm like, did I like it this way? Not particularly. Would I have liked it if they pushed it later? I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't.
yeah.
I don't know. I think there's something to be said for, thinking about the practical limitations. Like I think you just kind of indicated, is they've got to keep people hooked for 2 nights. Kind of makes sense to say, all right, end of night 1, we're going to defeat Pennywise as the kids, which gives you some sense of resolution, but we clearly have set up that he's not actually gone. And then night 2 is going to be, okay, well, now the adults have to deal with this.
Yeah.
Like that makes a degree of sense. And it's like, I think something we talked about quite a bit on the show when we were going through the book was the idea that like you don't really have tension over the idea of are they going to defeat Pennywise as kids.
Mm-hmm.
You know that they are, and you know that they're all going to survive, and then you know that it's not really going to be dead. You know everything important, and so the idea of holding that out for the purpose of maintaining suspense or tension, that's not the reason why you would hold it out. The only reason why you would hold it out is if you could amp up the drama of the climax by feathering it in with the climax in some clever filmic way, which
Yeah.
I've thought about how you could do that. Like you could get very artistic with it, where you're intercutting between adults and children doing things, and it's sort of blurring these timelines together.
Yeah.
That would be cool. Probably not something they were up to in 1990. Um, and I don't even know if that would work though. Like I
Yeah.
think that might be cool is what I should say. I don't actually know that would be cool. Anyway, I don't feel too strongly about it, I guess. So yeah, what do you think about this?
Well, I mean, I think it causes a few problems. I think the first, like, basically, so what they basically do in this movie is they take the Nebolt Street encounter and they take the final encounter with the kids in the sewer and they basically combine them into one encounter, right?
Yeah.
And it does this thing to me where it makes it feel like it happens very fast. Like we basically do, like we have six flashbacks to things that happen with these kids, and they basically redo the everyone's first encounter with it that we saw in the book, and then they all come together, and then it's like 30 seconds later. They're like, all right, let's take the fight to hit him, and we're
Yeah.
like, whoa, that happened really fast.
Yeah.
And then it also makes it kind of anticlimactic. And maybe that's the point, right? Maybe it should be anticlimactic, but just like they just kind of show up. Bev shoots a slug at his head, and then he goes down the drain. The
And
end.
then they're like, it's dead. It sounds dead. No,
Yeah.
okay. Now that you've sort of rejogged my memory, I think the parts that were jarring, I totally agree. Where there's no ominous buildup, there's no like, we really don't want to have to do this. In the book, it's almost like their hand is forced because they realize that like the town is sort of turning on them in some
Yeah.
metaphysical way, and it's like, okay, we have to do this now. Whereas, yeah, and in the show, they're just like, all right, let's do it. Let's go kill the monster, and then yeah, it's all very yeah. I mean, there's a lot of stuff like that in the kids section where I was. This is what I mean when I say I liked it more as it went on. Is like more specifically, like stuff like that happens in the beginning, or just like several of the supernatural encounters that the kids have with it feel kind of perfunctory and not scary, and also not moving the plot forward, and just kind of like, yeah, okay, yeah, I guess we have to do this, but there's nothing particularly dramatic happening here, and it's also not propelling the plot.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. True. But the adult section is primarily just them sitting around talking, and awkwardly massaging each other's shoulders while
Uh-huh,
doing so.
uh-huh.
And like, I get it. Like, here's I feel like here's the central problem with dividing it up the way they did, and I think we're going to see the same problem in the next two movies we're going to be talking about as well. The adult portion of the story before you get to the climax primarily serves as just a method of them remembering stuff that happened in their past, right? That, like,
Yeah,
for the most part, the adult section is just a tunnel to the past to where we get to see this kid stuff. So when
yeah,
you divide it up like they did in this movie, you get to the end of the first half, and you defeat it as children. And then you go into the second half. What do you have the adults do until they get to the climax? Well,
yeah.
all they can really do is sit around and talk and reminisce, and then so we do more flashbacks actually,
Uh-huh.
to parts, but they're flashbacks that happen after, in the chronology of what we've seen, after they've already overcome and defeated it. So it just kind of throws things off. And by the way, I think this problem is compounded in the two movies we're going to talk about in a couple weeks, when you do just kid stuff in the first half, and then you have to do all adult stuff, and it's like, well, what are they going to do? What do they do if they're not going to be remembering the kid stuff? And
Yeah,
and I think that becomes a huge problem in that movie. We'll get there. I think it is in some ways a problem in this thing as well, where a lot of these scenes, a lot of these sequences, and I like part of them. Like, I think one thing the adult actors in this movie do a very good job of is getting you to feel like these people are old friends, and like
hmm,
the way they hang out with each other, like the casual way they talk and even touch, like uh, we'll get to Ben, but him just like kind of casually massaging Bev on the shoulders while telling stories and stuff like that, I think is believable. Oh, these guys are old friends. But like, the solution that the movie had for how are we going to tell this great big history of Derry and everything that's happened since they were kids and everything Mike Hanlon has learned? Is he's just going to basically lecture them on all this stuff? Um, he's basically the narrative device that explains the plot to us and to the characters, and so it's just a lot of tell. It's just a lot of tell. Like even the stuff about Derry and the stuff about like what people in Derry are like, it's just characters being like, oh yeah, I do remember this one time that I got beat up and this guy just left. And so there's a lot of just the movie telling you like what
Yeah.
what it's about.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's again, it's innately very difficult to adapt because of the
Yeah.
structure of it, where
Mm-hmm.
it's like, yeah, you as you're following the adults on their return into Derry, you are learning about Derry in parallel via the adults and the children, because you don't know this information yet.
Mm-hmm.
So when the adult character sees a thing, you haven't necessarily seen that thing yet via the child's eyes in the book. And yeah, so
Mm-hmm.
it gets all screwed up, and it's all woven together. Um, as George Lucas said about the Star Wars prequel,
Don't do it.
it's intentionally designed to be that way, but we can minimize the effects of it. It's stylistically designed to be that way. Is the quote. Yeah, they had their work cut out for them adaptation wise. I don't think these guys did it perfectly, but like, yeah, we can sit here and we can point out all kinds of little ways they could have done it better. But like, I guess I'm almost, I said a minute ago that it exceeded my expectations slightly, and it's like, well, I kind of expected it to be pretty bad actually. I was like, I don't really see how you can manage this like intricate tapestry of all these characters, and it's woven like through time to manage both tension and viewer knowledge. It's like they did an okay job. They dropped the ball in a few places for sure. I agree.
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong here. Like these are the things that interest me when we talk about the structure,
Yeah,
because the
sure.
structure of this book fascinates me so much. I do think it's one of those almost insurmountable problems that like you have to make a choice here. There's basically two ways to do it. There's the way they did it here, and there's the way they did it in the future movies we'll talk about later. And I do think this is the better of those two choices. This is, there are consequences to that, and I think this movie suffers from the consequences. I think especially the second half of the movie suffers from the consequences. But it is probably the best way you could do it. By the way, there is some facts about this. Is Lawrence D. Cohen wrote both halves of this thing. In his original draft for the second half, it was way different. Basically, Tom came back and became the primary antagonist through a being controlled by it way, and was their basic primary antagonist in the second half of the story. And it was just not good. It was very like traditionally TV in that it was small, and you kind of understand why they wanted to do it that way. It was a lot safer than figuring out how to work a fucking spider.
Yeah.
But Tommy Lee Wallace, the author, or the director rather, looked at this and said, no, we can't do it that way. And Lawrence D. Cohen was busy working on something else, so Wallace had to basically rewrite the second half himself. He hadn't even read the book at the time. He just he had read the script and was like, the second half of this doesn't work. And then he read the book and goes, oh, this is why it doesn't work, because you departed from this story. Like you hewed very close to the story in the first half, and then you just completely departed from it in the second half, and there's where your problem is. And so he brought back a bunch of the stuff in the second half, and kind of fixed it. But I think even he says, the first half is this kind of perfect in his mind structural creation where things work, and the structure of the thing works with each character getting called in turn and reliving this memory. Like it just works in his mind. And then the second half is just more messy, and I don't think it's the perfect thing that he would want it to be. But
Yeah.
I mean, thank God they didn't go that way, because can you imagine just watching an hour and a half of Tom being the primary antagonist of your story?
I mean, what's funny is I totally forgot that Tom vanished from the movie. Like,
Yeah, he did. Yep.
I mean, obviously, instead of it being Tom who brings Audra down to the sewer, it's just Pennywise who does it. And
Yep.
as again, if you just watch the movie, and you haven't read the book, then you're like, oh yeah, I suppose he can do that. Why not? um, uh, yeah, right. So
Yeah.
so yeah, that works as a change, and it simplifies things nicely. It gets rid of a character who otherwise you'd have to. And I think I think it's fair to say that in the book just sort of does away with Tom too, where it's he comes to the town, you're so
Yeah.
worried, like, oh, he's gonna come after Bev, and it's gonna be a whole thing, and then he just dies.
Yeah, I think like Tom is really really interesting, and I enjoyed him, and what he represented in the story. But I think he serves the perfect role in this thing where he's there to be an antagonist to Bev at the very beginning, and he's there for Bev to have that very emotional scene with Ben where she says, I married my father. Why did I do
Uh,
that? Which, by the way, is his reaction like sometimes the dialogue in this thing is just bad, Matt. and and Ben's reaction to Bev saying, I married my father, why did I do that, why did I do this to myself? He's like, well, at least you experienced love.
uh-huh.
And I'm just like, Ben,
Yeah.
yeah, to a monster, like what? That's the worst way I don't know, just like, Ben, that's a terrible thing to say to a person.
I'm choosing to interpret that as Ben doing his best to just say something supportive, and the actor correctly being like, yeah, this is bullshit, but she's crying, so gotta say something.
Oh, it was so great. And I like, you know, um, John Ritter, great actor. Love
Yeah.
John Ritter. Rest in peace. But
Yeah.
dear Lord, like that's like. I guess that's a good transition. Can we talk about the characters a little bit here and their actors?
Yeah.
I think I agree with you for the most part that they all did a pretty good job. I mean, I think Jonathan Brandis as young Bill is the highlight of the kids to me. May he rest in peace as well.
Uh-huh.
Just great child actor, right?
Yeah.
Died way too young. I think what was he, like 20 something? I don't
27.
know.
Yeah.
Yeah, so he was very young. Um, Awful story, but he's like I think he's the best actor of the kids there, like by far, and like you can tell. Very very good. I always forget Seth Green is Richie in this, like always, like every time I've watched this I've forgotten Seth Green is Richie, and then I'm like, hey wait, that's Seth Green. I
Yeah.
forgot about that. I think he's pretty good too. I will say, and I feel like this is a weird thing to say, I feel like Ben isn't fat enough. I feel like Ben isn't fat enough. I think he just looks like a slightly bigger kid to me, and
Yeah.
the book just describes him as like so massively bigger than everyone else that
Yeah. I think they were probably limited by casting options.
sure, yeah.
But I actually, I mean, while I of course agree with you, I thought his performance was great. I mean, one thing I liked was there was some effort made to sort of line up the characterizations and performances of the adult and child actors.
Sure.
Like not like seamless, but in a couple of places I thought it really shone. Like I thought child Eddie actor and adult Eddie actor definitely shared notes in terms of how they were going to portray this guy, and I thought they even looked similar too. I thought it was really well done. That was probably my favorite, like, 1-to-1 match was a adult Eddie and child Eddie.
Yeah, no, I agree. I do think there's some that I didn't think worked as well. So I'm kind of fascinated by Richie as a character. I do think this movie kind of does Richie dirty a little bit. So we talked about Richie and how it's very easy to just have this very surface level read of Richie as just like the annoying one,
Yeah,
and there's so much more going on underneath it all. And I think that depth is a victim of this film, where he gets some good zingers in.
yeah.
He's
So
funny, but he's just kind of an asshole the whole
yeah.
time.
Well, and also he's the main one who's the doubter.
Yeah,
Who's
yeah,
we're not seriously going to do this. I'm going to leave. I'm going to leave.
yeah,
I mean, basically, my thought was he gets some great lines. He's funny, but that's kind of all.
yeah.
He's reduced to the comic relief.
Mhm.
There's not really any of the, like, they still have the I told you, Richie, don't call me line, but it doesn't really seem to have the same pathos to it because
Yeah,
Richie is I think that the Richie character is so hard to do when you can't see into his head.
Sure. Yeah.
And but anyway, I agree with you overall there.
Yeah. I mean, I think, we talked about Ben a little bit already. I liked Ben. I think like the loneliness part of Ben, I think got a little lost a
Uh-huh.
bit. I do think it was an interesting choice to change adult Ben's introductory scene. So they do several changes with Ben, right? So the first big change as a kid is that he's new to town, right? He's not that he's new to town, but that um like it seems like his father and his father's death is like the primary thing for him as a kid.
Right.
Um, and because I know he was new to town in the book too, right? I'm not sure I'm remembering quickly. Not like super new, but like in the movie, it makes it seem like he just moved here like yesterday, like he's like being introduced to the class, which I do not think was the case in the book.
I don't remember.
It's been too many weeks.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, the primary thing being his father, which his father like, and the lack of his father was definitely a thing in the book, but it was not his like his major thing.
Yeah.
Um,
Well,
and
yeah.
and then the choice as an adult, like I maybe it's just because I really love the scene with him in the Western United States bar talking to the bartender. I really love that scene. And the choice to make him kind of like a womanizer with this random girl
Uh-huh.
that he's like treating shittily. I thought like that's an interesting change. Like what are you trying to say with that here movie?
Yeah.
I
Well,
don't know. Do you have any ideas?
kind of. I think. So first of all, didn't we make the change to say that Bev is not actually married to Tom? That she's
Um
just living with him?
I believe that might be the case.
I
Yeah.
think that was a line that they threw in there, and then Ben is also with someone, but he's not really into her, and
Mhm.
and we're establishing that both of these people are attractive, by showing that other people find them desirable. Otherwise, how would you know they're attractive? Um, because otherwise he's just some loser who is an architect and who wants that. Um,
But he's on Time magazine. He's on the
he's
cover of Time.
he's on time, but he's dissatisfied with himself. But at least he has women throwing themselves at him. So I don't know. There's a complicated thing that you're trying to do where you're trying to set these two characters up and parallel them. I don't
Mhm.
think it was the most deftly done thing in the world, but I think what it is an attempt to parallel Bev and Ben, as
Yeah, I think that's
both
fair.
both not being happy with their romantic situations.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Speaking of romantic situations, Eddie's is a big change too, right?
yeah,
Where
that's one thing I wanted to talk about. Yeah, because I this is one of the choices that I thought again works really well in an adaptation where if you don't have the time to fully really like flesh out the idea that he has a wife and that he married his mom, which kind of only works if you also take the time to fully characterize his mom and
yeah,
also probably see a lot of what's going on in his head. It's like, yeah, just have it be that he literally still lives with his literal mom
yeah.
and has not really moved on. And then it's just like, yeah, okay, this is very very clear and obvious, and you save a lot of time, and you basically made the same exact point about his character. So
Yeah,
good
yeah.
change.
I agree. I think it is one of those things where that choice, just you look at that as an adaptive choice. It's just like yeah, you needed to simplify things a little bit. Makes sense. I'm with you on that for sure.
Yeah, yeah, and then that I felt like it was actually somewhat clever that they used that as the thing where, when they're about to go through the door, he says like, "Hey, I'm sorry, I lied to you about seeing somebody. I still live with my mom."
Yeah,
Which so one of the few moments in the story that like successfully like emotionally caught me off guard,
yeah, yeah.
because it's a change for one thing, but also just because I'm like, oh, this actually makes it even more poignant that like knowing that he's about to die because he has revealed this vulnerability,
Hmm.
and and again like a good Richie moment where he's like, sorry, there's nothing I can do about that. No, it's great. It's a great moment. I like that. That was like my favorite single moment that they changed about the story was all
Uh-huh.
that right there.
I
um,
agree. And to kind of repeat what you said, like in essence, Eddie was still married to his mother. So like just removing that metaphorical and just
Yeah.
making it literal, like, is just the perfect easy way to do this, right? It's just
Yeah.
like, yeah, well, just solved, easy, done.
Yeah.
um Totally agree. It really works. I think Eddie fares the best in this adaptation to me. um it's not that I dislike what they did with Bill. um I really I really don't like the ponytail. I really don't like the ponytail. I've never liked the ponytail.
Uh-huh.
Richard Thomas, I'm sorry. It's a bad. It looks bad. I can't get over it.
I did think it was pretty funny that they took like the idea that he's now bald and this is a metaphor for aging, and then it's like, what about really rad ponytail? Um, I guess yeah, I don't know. I don't know what they were thinking there. Actually, I
Mhm.
mean, I think what they were thinking, if anything, was like we have too many 38-year-old men. We need to visually distinguish them from each other. And we've already got two of them have mustaches, for Christ's sake.
Yeah.
So give him long hair. There we're good.
This is a network TV release. We don't have enough money to pay Richard Thomas to shave his head.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you're right. It is a perfect signifier of who this person is. It just looks bad.
Didn't they
I
also add a
can't take him
birthmark
seriously.
to his face and to the kid's face?
I feel like I, I I think that's a Richard Thomas thing that they maybe just added to the kid. I think
Yeah.
Richard Thomas just has that birthmark on his
Okay.
face, and I think they just added that to young Bill to line that up.
Yeah, that makes sense. I was wondering. I was like, either they really went overboard on the idea that these characters need to all be visually distinct, or one of these actors actually has a birthmark, which is fine.
Mhm.
It's
Yeah.
just something I noticed as I was watching.
Let's talk about Bev.
Yep.
So I like Annette O'Toole a lot.
Uh-huh.
Great actress. Played the original. Who did she play? She wasn't Lois Lane. No, she Lois Lane? No, I think
No,
she
I don't think
was
so.
Lana Lang in the
Oh.
Superman movie. And
Oh.
she's been she's been in everything, man. She's been
Okay.
everything. Um, I watched Smallville when I was a teenager, and she was Clark Kent's mom in Smallville. So that's, I think, the thing I saw her the most often in. But done everything. I think she's really great here. I'm not in love with the child portrayal of Bev. I think she's so kind of quiet that you can
Yeah.
barely tell who she is as a character.
Yeah. There's not a lot there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I think just Annette O'Toole for a moment. Like, I feel like she's not exactly the Bev that I had in my head. I mean, I guess
No, no,
none of them are exactly the characters that I had in my head, which is
sure,
fine.
yeah.
That's adaptations. But I think she was the furthest from being the Bev that I had in my head, and yet I was there for it. I was like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, I see what you're doing, and I like it. And maybe even when I reread the book, I will bring some of this back into my mental model of Bev, because
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of complexity here. Yeah, so I agree with that, and I also agree. I mean, the kids, there's just, yeah. I mean, they're child actors. It's like, it feels shitty to criticize, because it's like they're
Yeah,
literally children. What do you expect? And it's like fine. Like that's the
yeah,
problem. Is I'm like, it's mostly just fine. It's acceptable. It's not embarrassing, but neither is it like riveting. It's not like Stand by Me. It's not
sure.
even on the same plane of existence as Stand by Me, where you are actually captivated by the drama of what's happening with those child actors.
Yeah, and I do think the Bev stuff is victim to the fact that, hey, this is a network television movie, right? Like, I do think this movie pushes what was allowed to be on network TV a lot. Like, this really pushed the envelope. Like, the idea that it is kind of absurd. And take you back to 1990 for a minute here,
uh,
Matt. It is kind of absurd to go, we want to make an adaptation of Stephen King's It, and then you go, yeah, let's put it on network TV. Like, it's just almost antithetical to that idea. Like network TV for the longest time had this really, really strong rule against putting kids in danger on TV shows ever. Like, you couldn't do it. And here's a story that is all about putting children in danger. Like that's what the story is about, is the danger of being a child. Like the choice to do this is kind of astonishing. Like the fact that it happened is kind of crazy. And like I said, shows this real big shift in what we're going to allow on television.
Yeah.
But I do think the Bev stuff is like the most complicated in that, because like you show her father as like an abusive asshole, but you really can't get into the complications of that, right? Like
Yeah.
not on
Right.
ABC on a Monday night. Like you just can't. And so that is such a defining part of her character, especially young Bev and what she's going through, that kind of just gets lost a little bit, and the character suffers for it.
Yeah. Uh, that's true. That's interesting. I'm thinking. I am trying to think back to 1990. We were both quite young then,
Yeah.
but because it's funny because I'm like, well, the X Files was on in the early '90s, and that got pretty intense at points. But I think your point is like, well, I think that was because of stuff like this, and I'm
Yeah.
trying to think when was Beauty and the Beast would have been like 88, 89 maybe,
Oh,
probably.
that live action Beauty and the Beast. That thing was scary.
Yeah, my mom watched that when it was on TV, and I would see it. I would I have a few flashes of memory of Beauty and the Beast, which then I had the opportunity to have my mind blown later when I realized that George R. R. Martin was one of the key writers for that show.
And that you're talking the one with Ron Perlman as the
Yeah,
Beast, right? Yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
I said, yeah, that was 87 to 90. So, but I don't remember them showing much on that. Anyway,
Yeah.
I don't know what my point is here. I agree with you. That there was very little. I was reading about this earlier, and it's like, yeah, there was sort of no like market for like horror on TV. It was just
Yeah.
like, what are you talking about? That's not what TV is for. That's You put dramas on TV, you put comedies
Yeah.
on TV. Why would you put horror on TV? Nobody wants that. Um,
And that is why I do think like this thing does a lot of the horror, and as we've talked about, does it very well. I love the library scene. I think the photo album scene actually works really well. Like I don't know, I've like the image of Pennywise like flipping up and then popping up really close in the frame and then reaching out, I think is
uh-huh.
sufficiently creepy.
Yeah,
I also really like the Georgie winking at Bill part too. I think that works a lot. That it gets a little cheesy when the blood starts coming out, but just like the simple, this picture suddenly moves and winks at you, I think is really effective.
yeah, yeah. I like that. I thought it was
Um,
surprisingly good.
yeah,
Surprisingly convincing special effect like that.
but I do think because of the '90s TV nature of this, it does lean into the drama of it a lot,
Yeah, yeah,
and especially in the second half.
yeah.
Another scene, by the way, I really liked. I think the fortune cookie scene in this movie is excellent. I loved it. Um, I think it's so cool. Like the special effect for the eye fortune cookie, I thought it was particularly
Oh yeah,
effective. Really like that.
yeah. Yeah, I don't mean to be negative again talking about this stuff, but like I'm thinking about like the werewolf scene, and it's like there's nothing wrong with it. It's just like I'm so sure that would have looked way scarier on a television, or rather a CRT in 1990,
Yeah,
rather than, and it's like it has to do with like the way that it's lit for one thing. Um, like you can't get blacks on like a CRT. You can't get like a black, right?
yeah,
It's fuzzy. It looks like shit if you try like so they and they know that, like, so they don't even try, and they just light everything more. Whereas if you were shooting this for film, you would just light it totally differently in a way where you've got the werewolf like actually coming out of the darkness, and it would look different and scarier.
yeah,
So it's just like, yeah, like that's the kind of thing where like I think you could even say there's a reason you don't do horror on TV in the 90s, because it's very, very hard to like actually just technically execute something that looks scary in that medium.
yeah. I mean, this director, Tommy Lee Wallace, is a television director. That's what he does. He
Mhm.
did some feature length movies. He did Halloween 3, Season of the Witch, the Halloween without Michael Myers in it that a lot of people hate, but a lot of people like, is really,
Uh-huh.
really interesting choice. That one, I like it. It's a good movie. But for the most part, his career has been made for TV movies. Actually, that's kind of his bread and butter. And I think that's like that is, at least in the 90s and even the 2000s, that is a certain way of directing. That is a certain look. That is a certain way to light your scenes. That is a certain way to frame things. You don't have time and money to do a lot of really fancy cinematography and work. So yeah, it's going to look different. It's going to look cheesy. It's going to look silly. And I like, I don't want to say that as like a therefore it's bad. I just want to say that as, once again, like, the choice to make this, to me, is just kind of remarkable.
Yeah. Well, I guess it all boils down to, it apparently created a generation of Stephen King fans.
Yeah, it did. Like, that's the like this, like, if you go read critic reviews, like, a lot of people were very positive about this. A lot of people were very negative. A lot of people, I think, echo some of the things that you've said and I've said today, the things they didn't like about it. But it had its effect on people. It was incredibly popular. Tons of people watch this thing. Tons of people. And I think it's that just that idea of nobody had ever done a thing like this in this format before. Nobody had done it. And that's like the being the first and doing this was like something that really gave it staying power. There's a whole fucking documentary about the making of this movie. It's 2 hours long. The making of this movie there's a documentary about it. I haven't watched it all. I started to watch it and I thought I should probably stop this, so I'm not just echoing points from the documentary the entire time. But
Yeah.
it like, it's, I don't want to under stress the idea of just that it's kind of crazy that this thing exists and that it was as good as it was.
Yeah. Sure. I agree. It's an interesting piece of culture, right? Like, it's in some sense the most well known of his adaptations.
Mm-hmm.
Like, maybe that's not literally true, but it's true in the sense that, like, everybody knows about the phenomenon of Stephen King's It, that famous TV miniseries from the early 90s that made a whole generation of children scared of clowns.
Yeah.
It's like the meme of it has actually exceeded the fact of it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So that's, yeah, I'm glad we did watch it. I'm glad we watched it.
Yeah.
Glad we get to talk about it.
Yeah, I am too. And I think it's, as you said at the very, very beginning of this whole thing, I think it's overall a mostly effective adaptation of a work.
Yeah.
I think I have way more good things to say about it than I do some of the other things we're going to be talking about in a couple weeks. So I don't want to spoil these movies for you. I don't want to totally influence what you're going to think about them. I think in many ways the new movies like fix a lot of the problems with like the look and the feel and they're movies, right? They're movies in the truest sense. It's cinema. It's got, creative choices in lighting and cinematography and special effects that this thing just couldn't do. And it's cool in that regard. And in some ways they make some mistakes that I just don't understand at all, but we'll get to those.
Yeah.
We will.
Okay.
This is actually, by the way, I thought long and hard about maybe let's just watch both of the part 1 and part 2 and then just do one episode on them. And I decided not to do that because I think there's a lot of things to talk about in each of them independently. And I was worried that if we do them back to back, our conversation would be completely dictated by the way I feel about It Chapter 2, which is, spoilers, very negative. I have very negative feelings about It Chapter 2. And I didn't want that to completely rule the conversation. So I wanted to give each movie their own time, their own separate, and we could talk for about an hour about It Chapter 1. I'm just plenty to say there, and then take a break and then see the second movie, which is how I did it, right? Because these movies came out a couple of years apart, I think. So.
Yeah, sounds good. Before we wrapped, I did want to hit, like, we were going through the characters, and then I think I derailed us, but like I just, character wise, I think Mike might have been actually the closest match between what I had in my head for the character, both for kid and adult, probably. I guess maybe the kid a little bit less so, just because I had like a very vivid impression of Mike, because we see so much of Kid Mike in the book because we get all of his journal entries. That I just, what was, I think, maybe my favorite character possibly in the book. Hard to,
I
yeah,
love Mike, and I
yeah,
love what this adaptation does with Mike. I mean,
yeah,
we talked about, like, that's the interesting. We talked about the problem, I think, storytelling wise, with making him kind of the narrator of the piece. Like, from a storytelling perspective, I think the show don't tell of that hurts it, but from a character perspective, like, it perfectly encapsulates who Mike is in
yeah,
the book. I think,
yeah,
like, you do lose a little bit about the stuff with his dad, just for time. Like,
right,
I think, like, you get a little of the Henry Bowers racism stuff that so rules him as a kid. Like, you get, that's there. And by the way, I'm surprised they could say the N-word as much as they could on
yeah.
network television in 1990. That
I
really
I
surprised
was
me.
like, oh wow, they did that,
Yeah.
huh?
Um,
Um,
but 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 like, I think you're right. Like, in many ways, mm, I'm going to say this, and it's going to make it seem like I'm selling the adaptation short again. But I do think in many ways he's the easiest to adapt,
uh-huh.
as long as you kind of stick with, like, the big moments of who he is in the book, because I think so much of his character is defined by the plot, because just like of his role in the whole story. That
He does have some of the most interestingly dramatic moments, actually. So I see
Yeah,
what you're saying.
yeah, yeah.
Um,
So I agree with you. I liked Mike a lot. I think he works very well in both versions.
yeah,
I think, like, what the choice, like, another adaptive choice that just makes so much sense when you look at it, is how they decided to get him attacked by Bowers. And, like, like, there's all these characters, and are we gonna split them all up and then have to cut back and through all these scenes? It's like, no, no, no. He's just gonna attack them when they're all together.
yeah,
He's just gonna attack Mike when they're all together, and he's gonna stab Mike, and then Eddie's gonna stab him. Bang, bang, boom. We did it. We accomplished the same thing, plot wise,
yeah.
but we one less setup, and one less scene, and one less shooting day done.
So I actually thought that that was a pretty good change too, by the way, because they simultaneously Pennywise is sort of ambushing Ben,
Hmm.
using subterfuge in the form of Bev, which is like, again, not the kind of thing that would have happened in the book at all, but like, because again, this is a movie where you have totally different rules for how Pennywise is able to work. It's like, oh yeah, that's clever. That's a clever sort of way to attack Ben here. Um,
How did we almost leave this episode without talking about that scene, which is, like, my favorite scene in the whole movie? It's so mean.
yeah,
It's so mean.
yeah, it's great. It's great. I mean, it is. I agree. Like, it's a great, especially to us as the book readers, because we're like, oh, they get to be, they're
Yeah.
gonna, and then they're just screwing with you. And it's like,
And
yeah, like it makes sense actually.
yeah.
It's
Yeah,
good.
it totally does. And then my favorite John Ritter moment in the whole movie is when Bev brings up the poem later, and he just assumes it's Pennywise again, and, like,
uh,
flips the fuck out at
yeah,
her. I loved it. I loved
yeah.
it so much.
Yeah. Yeah. So like that was very tense to me. Number one, because they were changing things, which meant I didn't know it was going to happen. And
Hmm.
number two,
Hmm.
they successfully, like, oh, it's like a trap. Like Pennywise is attacking them using Bowers and also using himself in his,
Hmm.
ability to shapeshift. It's like clever. It's good. I like that. I like that whole section.
Yeah,
Um,
it did definitely, like, they made a clear adaptive choice to be like, we don't have time to explain all these people that Pennywise is using to get his way, so we're just going to allow him to be anyone, basically. Like,
uh,
with Audra, he's the gas station attendant.
yeah.
Yeah, he gets to be Bev as well. I think he does it a few more times that I'm not thinking about right now, but one change I'm curious about. So, we went all through all these characters. We didn't talk about the changes to their kind of first encounter, right? The big Eddie change is that it happens in a shower.
Yeah.
I thought that scene was wonderfully creepy. Like, just the idea of the shower head slowly pulling out, and, like, these, like, abnormally long shower heads coming out of the wall, creeping
Yeah.
towards him in the middle, I thought was really, really effective.
Yeah. Yeah. Sure. Sure. I like that. I like that. That was maybe one of my favorite
Hmm.
sort of just pure horror scenes, because it's like weird is what
Yeah,
I liked
it's
about
really
it.
weird.
Yeah,
And then Pennywise reaches his arms up and makes the drain bigger, and
yeah,
that effect looks cheap, but also kind of works because he's popping
yeah.
out of the drain.
I mean, I have a deep affection for fake looking 90s special effects actually. um so I can handle like if it's done well, if it's done with love, you know.
Do
Um,
you know, I just had like a memory spasm, and now I am 95% convinced that the scene I saw over the couch when I was a kid was the bathroom scene
okay, okay,
with little Eddie. Like, um,
okay,
memory's fallible, and who the hell knows, right? But
yeah,
like, it feels right to me.
yeah. That would have been terrifying to you as a small
Yeah,
child. So
it would have. It would have. We kind of already talked about Ben's change a little bit, where it's his father, and there's no standpipe in this, but that very creepy looking building, like next to the marsh, I think that was a very like composition wise, and in a movie that I think looks rather cheap and not good for most of it. I thought that whole like that location they found for that I thought
yeah,
was really really great.
yeah, I agree.
Fun fact about the skeleton that popped out of the water,
Uh huh.
by the way, they wanted that skeleton to have like bits of flesh on it,
Uh huh.
and the network would shockingly wouldn't let them do that.
Uh huh.
So they just painted them green and said it was seaweed.
That's funny. That's great. Speaking of
uh,
that, perhaps an inelegant segue to talk about Stan for a second, um, where
oh yeah, we didn't talk about Stan at all. Maybe
Stan.
there's a
Well,
reason for that.
it's a fine way to wrap up actually, because Stan, the the suicide in the bathtub scene is potentially like one of the most shocking things that happens in the entire book, both plot wise and visually.
Yeah,
And I found it to be pretty disappointing in the adaptation. Um,
yeah,
I mean, not to be totally morbid about it, but it's like, okay, you didn't show anything, and then also it's super corny how his wife just like it's just not doing a great job portraying the moment. I didn't feel pulled into the drama. I was pretty let down by that.
yeah. I really love. So here's the couple things I love about it.
Uh-huh,
I love the choice to make it the capper of your night one of night two.
uh-huh,
Like I think that's a great structural choice. Just like this is how we're going to end it is perfect. Love it.
yeah,
They changed the order in which we meet the losers to do that, and I think that works. I love the way it is written on the wall there. That's one
yeah,
of those images that just is burned into my brain forever.
sure,
But everything else, I think I largely agree with you. It doesn't work, and I think a lot of the problem of that is the by changing it around, it actually gives you an opportunity to get to know Stan pretty well
uh-huh,
before that moment. Because we don't have this long slow introduction to Stan that we got in the book through that wonderful chapter that I think you still said is one of your favorite chapters in the book, where we
right,
meet his wife and like learn about Stan and his life through his wife. We don't get any of that, um, but we do have an entire half a movie's worth of characterization of young Stan, and I just don't think they do a good job characterizing young Stan. Like I
yeah,
just don't think they do. They like I think they tried to lean heavily into the Stan is the practical, rule follower by just being like, "Oh, let's just make him a scout
yeah,
and he's just going to be like a boy scout."
yeah.
And that's how we're going to do it.
He's literally a Boy Scout, which I
Yeah.
mean, it's not even a characterization that particularly matches his adult persona,
No.
because
No.
his adult persona, I actually, so I, what I did like is I liked everything up until the suicide, where he's like having banter with his wife, and it's like delightful, and that
Yeah.
that to me caught the vibe of what the book was doing, where it's like,
Mhm. Mhm.
despite the fact that they've been married forever, they're still deeply in love and flirty, and they even introduced the idea of like, we should have kids, like they're so in love, and you were so happy for him, and then we crash into this with this horrible thing, and it's like, again,
Mhm.
like the most horrible, like one of the most horrible things you can imagine is like a wife finding her husband who slashes wrists, and it's like, and you failed to make this be dramatic on the screen, so just that's an F right there. That's a failure.
Yeah. I agree. Definitely one of the more disappointing aspects of it, and yeah, I think you're right. It compounds it when this is just such an important moment for the entire
Yeah,
story. I do
yeah,
think I'm gonna kind of contradict myself a little bit here and say like I love it as this punctuation point on the end of part one of two, but I
uh,
also love it in the book as this capital letter at the start of everything,
Yeah,
like this,
yeah,
it is such a declarative statement of what the story is going to be to put at the very, very, very beginning of your book.
yeah,
And you did lose that a little bit here.
yeah. Exactly. I mean, I totally agree that was emphasizing the cosmic horror element of things. Is like it's so scary that this guy would rather just immediately die than even
Mhm.
consider facing it. And it's like, okay, you have set my expectations, sir. Um,
Yeah, and that works better when it's an unknowable thing that you haven't met yet than
yeah,
when you've seen albeit very creepy Tim Curry playing a clown that just got sprayed with an inhaler and shot in the head with
yeah,
a, a piece of metal
right.
and
You're like,
went
oh,
jelly down a drain.
you were scared of that.
Yeah, that's the thing. That's the
Yeah,
thing. Yeah,
yeah, exactly.
I do like. I'm glad the Deadlights are in it, and I totally understand why they just carved out Chud and all the the really like
Cosmic.
wild
Yeah,
cosmic shit. Like I get it. I totally get it. But there's something lost when the fight is just physical, like
yeah,
when it's just a physical encounter between a bunch of kids or a bunch of adults and a spider or a clown. Like there's just something less there. And I don't know how to solve that because I like you can't like the turtle, like just going down that road is tough. It's really tough, especially in a TV movie in 1990.
yeah.
But there's just always going to be something lost there.
Yeah, right. I mean, I think nowadays you can imagine all sorts of stuff that you could do, but it's if you just do the exercise of like, okay, now how would you do that using 1990 TV budget? It's
Yeah.
like, oh, okay, I see the
I mean, they had
problem.
to fight to do the spider. Like they
Yeah,
really did. Like the network at first was like, absolutely not. Absolutely not. We're not doing that. How do we even make that work?
yeah,
And they showed them a way to make it work. And like we already talked about, it kind of doesn't. But I'm
yeah,
still glad they did it.
yeah, yeah. Me too. I didn't think it was like I thought it was like within the parameters of corniness that I expect. It wasn't like show ruiningly bad. It was just like, yeah, it's a fake spider. It's the same way that you watch it. Sorry, The Thing, which it looks amazing.
Don't compare the special effects of these two movies, please.
It's just like I think I've said this before. Like when something's fake. And so
Sure.
like it doesn't matter how good it looks in some sense. It's like I know I already know it's fake. It's fine. I know I'm watching a movie. It's fine. It's I just the spider didn't ruin anything for me is my point.
Yeah, okay, but like the Thing special effects are like some of the best practical effects ever
No,
done.
they certainly are. They certainly are. But at every point you can look at an image and be like that. Yep, that's a plastic sculpture, and that's fine. That's not a criticism of The Thing. It's just like you do have to in any movie you watch, you have to be willing to accept what you're watching, right? You just have to bring some amount of suspension of disbelief. And I'm just saying I don't have a problem with things looking kind of crappy as
Sure.
long as like the drama around it is persuasive.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, I get that. I'm totally with you on that. I think too often people just want to dismiss hokey looking special effects. Like if the story around them works, then they work.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
fine. The reason why the new Marvel movies are bad is not because the CGI is terrible, but it is also because the movies aren't very good.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, anything else you wanted to talk about before we wrap this here episode up?
Nope.
That is the 1990 It miniseries. Would love to hear y'all's personal stories with this thing because I know you all have them because this was such a hugely influential thing that happened in all of our lives. So yeah, we no discussion question today. We're not going to read any answers on the episode or anything, but just for my and Matt's enjoyment, and I think the community's enjoyment, why don't y'all just share your experience with this movie with us this week?
Yeah, that's a good idea.
But that is going to do it for us next week. As I said, we are going to take a look at the 2017 adaptation of Stephen King's It. It was just called It. And Matt, I could tell you this is not a spoiler, but the big thing they did at the end of this is at the very end of this movie, when It appears on the screen, underneath it appears Chapter 1. And everyone's like, oh, Oh my gosh. Unless, of course, you read the book or followed the news and knew that it was always going to be one of two.
Uh-huh.
So
It-
yeah,
it's funny that this happened in such close proximity to Dune Part One,
which did the same
but
thing.
did the same exact thing. Yeah.
I don't know why we insist on doing these things. Well, I do know why we insist on doing these things, because both of those movies correctly predicted that putting a part one in your movie would hurt the movie.
Uh-huh.
A fact that Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part One did not realize.
Uh-huh.
I don't know if you saw
Well,
the news that they are not calling the next movie Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part Two. They're just going to change the name.
I did not know that, but good choice.
But now there's going to be part one. What they're going to do is just like quietly remove the part one from it.
Yeah.
And pretend like they never called it that.
Yeah.
And
They'll
it'll
rename
probably
it.
work because we all have really short memories.
Yeah. They'll rename it Tom Cruise's Mission Impossible.
With an exclamation point.
Yeah.
Anyway, we were doing the outro and then I distracted us.
We were. Yeah. And that reminds me that you should reach out to us at kingslingerspod@gmail.com or on Twitter at kingslingerspod or on subreddit over at reddit.com/r/doofmedia. And there this week, you can let us know your formative It experience with this miniseries.
Yeah, if you are not already subscribed to Kingslingers, now's the time to do it. You don't want to miss our conversation about It, Chapter 1 either. You can find us wherever podcasts are, all of the places. You can find us there.
And if you like any of our shows and you want to support us, then please consider donating on our Patreon account, patreon.com/doofmedia. Reminder that if you are donating at the appropriate level over there, then you'll be accelerated to the front of the line for buying those tickets for our event in Bangor.
Yeah, we actually got a question last week about what is the appropriate level. So just to clear that up, we have kind of our, I think, 4 tiers, right?
Yeah.
Our 4 official tiers, and as long as you are donating at one of those tiers, you should get the link and be fine there. If you are like, Patreon allows you to just enter a number and do that. So like if you're like a $1 donor that doesn't have an official tier or something, those are the only people that I don't think will get it. But if you're on one of the tiers, you should be able to get that link.
All right.
Yeah. If you cannot afford to support us right now, that we totally make sense. Completely understand. There are tons of ways you can help us out. You can share this podcast. Please keep sharing us. We get emails. I just got 2 emails today, Matt, by some people who found us. One found us by just typing Dark Tower into their podcast search engine and us popping up, which that's thanks to your reviews, folks. The other person found us by another Stephen King community sharing our podcast. So you're doing good work, everyone. So please keep that up. Speaking of reviews, I've been neglecting our friends over at Audible, Matt, because I don't know if you knew this, but our podcast is also on Audible. And Audible, because the books are there, has a review system. And people have been reviewing us on Audible this whole time.
Oh, shit.
And I've not been reading them. So this week we have a review from Audible from Amber, who gives us 15 stars.
Okay.
Audible has like a 3 different overall performance and story they allow you. So it really is 15 stars. 15 stars, and says, don't pass this podcast up. In general, podcasts are not something I was ever really interested in. As a longtime King fan and Tower junkie, I decided a couple of years ago to sign up for Audible and make my way through the King universe via audiobook. I happened to stumble upon this podcast and almost passed it up, thinking I couldn't possibly be interested in hearing anyone talk about a book I've just listened to. I'm so glad I gave it a chance, because it's been an awesome experience reading alongside with these guys. I finally just caught up and I'm excited to get into it with the quartet. Long days and pleasant nights, my friends. Let's float. Well, Amber, thank you so much, and I'm glad I found out that your review exists. So I got to read it. There's 57 of these on here, Matt. So we've got 57 more weeks of reviews to read.
Hell yeah. All right.
Thank you, Amber, and thank you everyone who has left those reviews, especially those of you over on Audible that I've been disgracefully ignoring for the past 2.5 years. I am so sorry.
God, I had no idea. Awesome.
All right, folks, that is going to do it for us this week. We promised you a short episode this week after our 3-hour marathon one last week, and I gotta say, we've delivered. I'm proud of us.
Yeah.
Good job, us.
Yeah.
We'll see you back here next week for It Chapter 1, 2017, rated R. Long days and pleasant nights.
And may you have twice the number.